Welcome to Americana Archives. Today's headline is Wild Bill Hickock was not bad man, yet he was bad man to meddle with. It says, Wild Bill Hickock, the most famous gunman of the West's early days, was not a bad man, but a bad man to meddle with. So says William H. Houston, Missoula pioneer and peace officer who knew Wild Bill when that celebrity was at his zenith. Wild Bill secured Mr. Houston his first job, that of guarding the Gilman-Salisbury stages, which ran from Cheyenne, Wyoming to Deadwood, South Dakota. Hickock killed 40 white men, and nobody knows how many Indians, relates Mr. Houston. But he never killed, except in performance of duty, or to save his own life. He never courted trouble, or never dodged it either. If any person was spoiling for a fight, he could find it by monkeying with Wild Bill, and usually the fight was of short duration. I remember once that Wild Bill, Buffalo Bill Cody, myself, and several others were playing Faro in Abilene, Kansas. Hickock was city marshal then, and under his rule, most of the bad men had been run out of town or killed, so things were pretty quiet. While we were enjoying our game, a tenderfoot entered the room and horned in, though it was evident he didn't know his company. Otherwise, he would have been more discreet. This tenderfoot, trying to be a bad man, made several profane remarks after getting a seat at the table, then reached over and took one of Wild Bill's bets. "Pardon me, stranger," says Wild Bill, "but that's my money you just picked up." "What the hell difference does that make to you?" says the tenderfoot, eyeing Bill. Wild Bill reached for a bowie knife, which he always carried in his boot, but the dealer jumped up and grabbed his hand before he had a chance to draw his blade. The tenderfoot, sensing the lay of the land, grabbed for his gun, and the dealer made a reach for him, and there he stood, one hand on each of the antagonists. I and the other fellows made a quick run for the door. There was a partition between us and the street door, I remember. It was there before we made our dash for the outside air, not afterward, for we took it down as though it had been made of paper. Meanwhile, the dealer had told the tenderfoot who Wild Bill was, so the would-be bad man apologized handsomely and excused himself from further participation in that game. "How did Hickock get that name, Wild Bill?" Mr. Houston was asked. "How he won his name. He earned that title when a Union spy during the Civil War," said the narrator. "He used to take the wildest chances with his life, which seemed to be charmed, for he always got out of every hole. When he came west after the war, that name followed and stuck to him tighter than a brother. Wild Bill was the fastest man with a gun I ever saw," continued Mr. Houston. "I was no slouch in my day, but Hickock was in a class by himself. He used to fan his guns, that is, he tied the trigger back to the frame, and fired the weapon by pulling back the hammer with his thumb. He tried to teach me that trick many a time, but I never could master the art. One time, when Bill was marshal of Abilene, he went into a saloon to arrest a real bad man who was drunk and raising particular Hades. He was shooting at the bar fixtures and having a general good time, and when Bill entered, he found himself covered by the reveler's gun. Knowing the mettle of his man, Wild Bill resorted to a little bit of stage play. His face assumed an expression of horror, and pointing his finger over the man's shoulder, he shouted, 'Hold on there, don't shoot him.' The bad man turned around, expecting a gun pointing at his vitals, but there was nobody behind him. It was his last act, for when Bill saw him turn, he whipped out his Colt and let the bad man have it through the heart. When he called Buffalo Bill. Another time, when serving in the army during an Indian uprising, he was sent out with Buffalo Bill to talk things over with a band of redskins. Buffalo Bill was something of a bluffer, and during the combat he fired his gun in an attempt to scare the braves. "Did you fire that shot?" demanded Wild Bill. "Yes," says Cody. "What about it?" "Well, you crazy tenderfoot," responds Hickock, "when you shoot, shoot to kill, or else keep your gun in the holster. Wild Bill's greatest exploit, according to Mr. Houston and other old-timers, took place in 1861. Some say it occurred in Nebraska, but Mr. Houston says it happened at Muncie, Kansas. This was Hickock's single-handed fight with the McCannels, or McCandles, gang of 10 desperados, in which he slew every one, using a pistol, a rifle, and a knife to end the lives of his enemies. The fight took place after the gang had chased him into a cabin, then stormed his refuge. Hickock's deadly aim accounted for an antagonist as long as his ammunition held out, and when that was gone, he used his knife to the best advantage. Hickock was badly wounded during the fray, but careful nursing restored him to his usual good health. Wild Bill was a handsome man, all as historians agree. He was a pronounced blonde, and allowed his light curly hair to grow long, the ringlets reaching below the shoulder line. As was customary in the early days, his upper lip boasted a mustache, not the clipped and affected Charlie Chaplin's of today, but a luxuriant growth of hair. No less a person than General George A. Custer, the famous Indian fighter, called the mustache handsome. Custer and Hickock were firm friends for many years, the acquaintance originating when Wild Bill scouted for the general. Custer described Hickock as being 6 feet 1 inch tall, straight as an Indian warrior, with broad shoulders and deep chest. He had well-formed limbs and was a magnificent specimen of manhood, and never, by word or action, gave the impression of being anything but a gentleman. Wild Bill was modest. Wild Bill never boasted of his achievements, says Mr. Houston. He never intruded where he was not invited, unless he went to perform his duty as an officer, and his conduct was above reproach. Unlike the famous Slade, also a killer of bad men, who went bad himself and was hanged at Elder Gulch, Montana, Hickock never forgot that he was an officer of the law as long as he wore his badge, and he never overstepped the bounds of decency. Many old-timers have regretted that Wild Bill and Slade never had a chance to meet. That would have been a battle to go down in song and story. But it could have had but one outcome. Wild Bill could draw his gun and shoot, while Slade was thinking about it. Hickock was married in February 1876 to Mrs. Emma Lake, proprietress of the Lake Circus and a performer of note. The wedding took place at Cheyenne, and Mr. Houston was present when Wild Bill became a Benedict. He was devoted to his wife during the few short months they lived together, for the hand of an assassin put an end to that happy union on August 2nd, 1876. Jack McCall, a desperado seeking notoriety, entered a building in Deadwood, South Dakota on that fateful day, and discovered Wild Bill playing cards. For once in his life, Hickock was not facing the door. It was but an instant's work for McCall to draw his gun and fire at the unsuspecting victim. Wild Bill fell, a bullet in his head. His assailant later was hanged at Yankton, South Dakota. Mrs. Hickock died August 20th, 1917, at Jersey City, New Jersey, 41 years and 18 days after the tragic death of her husband. A stone monument was erected over Wild Bill's grave by a lifelong friend, Colorado Charlie Ulter. But souvenir hunters soon chipped it down to the ground. A second was erected, and today it is protected by a heavy wire fence from those who would desecrate the monument of a popular hero for the sake of a piece of stone from the head of his grave. This story came from the great state of Montana, being reported in the Kevin Review of October 29, 1925. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we'll see you next time on Americana Archives.